A very warm welcome and good evening from me, Charulata Bansal, and the Celerity team. At Celerity, we aim to be a one-point source by generating first-hand credible content on relevant business topics through multiple channels and media. This fireside chat, the first in our series, is one more step in the direction of generating such conversations. So, dear audience, presenting to you an exciting 45 minutes of two stalwarts discussing everything from their passion to what leadership means, importance of being a socially responsible citizen, and life lessons. Let us make it further interactive by asking questions. So, welcome Shailesh ji and Sanjay ji.
Thank you.
Over to you, Sanjay ji. Please take forward the discussion.
Thank you so much, Charu. A grand welcome to everyone in the first of our Fireside Chat series. Thank you, each of you, for your time in joining us today. My name is Sanjay Desai. I run my own supply chain advisory practice, including talent management and executive placement agency under MRI worldwide. As a part of my routine, I get to work with some of the most brilliant and young minds in the startup, fintech, and MSME world. I'm based out of Singapore. Today's fireside chat will be engaged for 45 minutes, and I encourage you to post your comments and questions live on the screen. I will take the questions as they come in. Today, we are going to talk to one of the most revered, respected senior leader, a little bit of everything from personal to social and to corporate leaderships, and also to unravel the man himself and his missions. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti. Shaileshji, thank you so much for being with us today.
Delighted to be here. Very, very happy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Haribhakti needs no introduction, actually. But, sir, must I have to cover your introduction in detail today? I'm
Please go
afraid
ahead.
that it will take entire 45 minutes, right? And just to give a brief to our delegates, I will do a very small introduction, sir. Please allow me to do that. By education and profession, Mr. Haribhakti is a certified chartered accountant, certified cost accountant, certified internal auditor, a fraud prevention expert, and a certified environmental social governance director. He sits as the chairman of the board as well as an independent board of director on multiple companies. There are so many companies, and I'm lost to mention all of them, so I'll mention a few. Blue Star, Confederation of Indian Industry, Future Lifestyle, Institute of Directors, L&T Finance, L&T Mutual, ACC, Ambuja Cements, Bajaj Electricals, and I can go on literally for next 45 minutes. However, Shailesh, I will stop here. And let me say this, that Shailesh, I consider this as my honor today and privilege to start the proceedings with your prior permission. May I, sir?
Please, what a delight it is to chat with you, Sanjay.
As always, sir. So let me start with something which I know very well, and I've done my homework as well, sir, that you have a lot of first to your credit. Like you were a national scholar, and in the ISC board exam also, you are always first. You are the first ESG certified board of directors in India as early as this year. You are the first certified internal auditor in India when you came back from your Chicago stint, very early part of your life. And also, you're one of the youngest professors at IIM Ahmedabad at the age of 25 years. So, where does this come from? Is it a family DNA? And how hard you work at it?
Well, the one lesson that I've always kept very much in my mind is hard work never killed anybody. And so I work extremely hard. Even today, it is not unusual for me to keep a 16-hour work day. And so that is one lesson that I have taken to heart. It was my maths teacher in school who had once remarked to my mother that he may not be the most brilliant student in my class, but he works so hard that he makes up for what he lacks in terms of dazzling brilliance. So I've always kept that warning in mind. And and therefore coming first is not something that I plan to do. It
Mm,
happens. It is something that comes naturally. And there are many occasions when I'm not first as well. For example, I did not land up at the first position in the CA exam, which is a lifelong disappointment for me.
Yeah, there are always some exceptions to the rules, right? So the C exam would consider as an exception. And
Yeah,
you said that hard work doesn't kill anyone. I completely agree with that. However, from a perspective of academics, right, it's not so easy to score first almost everywhere that you have taken. And besides hard work, it is also the natural ability, or sometimes I would call it being there at the right time and right moment as well, sir.
absolutely. It is so important that uh, life's every chance must be welcomed, must be embraced, and you should go at it as the opportunity arises. It is like a data set. If
Yes.
it is not captured when it is happening, it's lost forever. You can never go back to it. And that is why I say to everybody, make sure that you don't regret a single opportunity that comes your way and you don't grab it.
Excellent. I know somebody said that opportunities are never lost. Opportunities are taken by people who are ready and willing. And in your case, you are always ready and willing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even today, I feel I get obsolete so rapidly that if I'm not open to new topics, for example, 5 days ago, I did not truly know what the whole epoch that we are going through today, Anthropocene,
Yeah.
meant. But as soon as I got curious about it, I read it up. I listened to multiple hours of videos on it, and today I can speak about it at least. I'm not a total ignoramus.
Amazing. So it's all about being sustainable and kind of, ahead of the game and preparing all the while. Excellent.
Absolutely.
So you have three facets, and I've been following you for a long time now. And from my perspective, right, being an accountant is one, being a chair of the board on many companies is one, and then being an ESG person at your heart. Now, if somebody keeps a gun at your head, which God forbid we don't want, but which of the three that you would lean the most as your home?
You know, what comes naturally to me is to be a learner. So in whatever role I have the opportunity to learn more through exposure to people who are brighter and better than me. And that happens in my role as board chairman very often. Board members are so much more knowledgeable, wise, full of ideas. And I learn a lot from them. So for me, that is very critical. And equally, in the field of ESG, every day I live and learn. Every day there's a new insight.
Yeah.
Today's insight for me came in your area, Sanjay,
Hmm.
supply chain. And it just struck me that if you don't think of supply chains, you will simply run out of things that you must have. So take the case of having to produce all of those EV vehicles,
Hmm.
or take the case of having all those windmills created, or take the case of just simply making sure that energy transition to hydrogen happens.
Yes.
Now, all of this needs metals of the kind that are in short supply,
Yeah.
copper being one of them. Now, if we don't have the means to access more copper that the world will need to go green, our Go Green program can be stalled. And
Yeah.
all this is really supply chain, and it's what takes technology and time to overcome.
Exactly. So taking the ESG through further, there are 17 SDGs that where Sweden ranks as number one, and India is pretty way behind, probably around 100. But however, India has set up a very strong goal to be under 50 by year 2025. I was watching one of your presentations in the ICWA curriculum, sir. Now, Shailesh, how difficult it is And what pathways do you see in front of us to achieve that target?
So we have three pathways, Sanjay. India is a blessed country in terms of natural resources. It is also blessed in terms of sunlight shining on our landmass for large swathes of time. We also have wind, which is blowing and turning our windmills in a way that we are able to generate at least sustainable, economically viable quantum of power from all these sources. The good news for India is that the cost per unit of generating solar and wind power has actually fallen below the cost of generating a fossil fuel driven unit of power. And that is an inflection point which is going to lead us to becoming the country which does a very rapid energy transition. That's one. Second, we naturally do not have large consumption power
Mm.
because the per capita incomes of our country are low. And if we are able to democratize production, make it more efficient, and make goods available, then India might become the first country which will have haves and have mores rather than haves and have nots. And that is a goal that we can reach because we are not already at a per capita income level of, say, 7,000.
Yes.
So that's where our opportunity lies, that we can become responsible in terms of our consumption. We can bring in converging technologies into our manufacturing. We can distribute what we produce in a way that it becomes affordable at low per capita incomes, and we can do it in a green way. So we have this opportunity to create a fresh ecosystem, which other countries may not have the opportunity to do because the stranded assets which would arise as you try to transition and
Mm.
make the change could be of such a large magnitude that they would balk at it. We don't have that problem.
And is it because of that? One of the ladies in UN mentioned that India's growth and India's ability to be under 50 by 2025 is very critical to the world. How do I decipher that statement, sir?
No, it's very critical and it is so true and relevant. The path to below 2 degrees Celsius lies through India and China.
Yeah.
That's what one of the panelists at a recent seminar mentioned, and I think she was completely right. Because these are the two large, highly populated nations on Earth. And in the Anthropocene epoch, the extent to which we needed to take out from Mother Earth was at an extremely high level.
Right.
And we now have learned how to get back into what I like to call a clean tech revolution, which is what we all need to engage in, particularly in India and China. China is way ahead.
Yeah.
They have they have discovered the Holy Grail much ahead of us. They have integrated supply chains, they have become the largest manufacturers, they've adopted technology, they have they have the means to actually obliterate all cash dealings in their economy. They've got enough infrastructure to do that. We need to build up to it. The good news is that we are at a midpoint in
Yes.
this whole evolutionary process. And now we need to accelerate.
Excellent. So just taking it forward, can you tell us a bit more about Goviva Consulting and what are the activities that you're involved in it?
Sure. Um, Gaviva was uh, initiated by the inspiration of the ex-chairman of SEBI, Mr. G.N. Bajpai. He had this driving desire to create a platform which would make sure that governance, social responsibility, and environmental stewardship all could happen off a platform. Then what happened is that Mr. Jangudalal joined us in this mission. And three of us then decided that let us start doing things that are possible to do. So 5 years ago, we set out on this journey. It took us 2 years to get our platform for governance ready. And now we are working to anoint that platform with the E and S parts. And hopefully, within 6 to 8 months, we should be able to give the world its first automated platform, which will enable them to get onto the ESG path in a fairly facile way. And what is helping us is that the whole world is getting uniform. So we have the Value Reporting Foundation, which is going to combine the GRI and the SASP, both of this, all this initiative happening in the United States. And then we have the Sustainability Standards Board getting established in UK to harmonize the way the measurement of all these impacts are to be. Now, when we have access to all of that, and the world flips to a repository enhancement and draw down from the repository modality, then will become critical to enable whoever accesses the platform to get onto it and get the value that is desired. So that's the goal that we are pursuing in Gaviva.
And does Gaviva stand for something?
Governance leading to economic value add. So we are still focused on of adding economic value, very much so.
Exactly. I have always heard from you on the value add proposition. Now, when we talk about ESG, and there are a few more factors that I talk from supply chain perspective, and I'm going down to a very root level. For example, the chemical industry in India or in China, and we in India especially, we really haven't attained those standards of environmental, at least from a chemical perspective. When we say value add, the industry is doing well in terms of manufacturing product, getting the output, getting it across to the customers, and we have been growing at a rate of 10 to 12%. But are we able to achieve that environmental governance there, sir, in a right manner?
No, the answer is a clear no, Sanjay. Unfortunately so. Because we have got so used to linear thinking.
Yes.
We are not able to think exponentially and out of the box
Yes.
and feel safe and secure about thinking and acting out of an exponential mindset. That is a big pivot that the world has to make. And actually, there is no path to that pivot. It just has to be wished and executed. And that's how it happens. So there are companies that you have seen which have given us dramatic 30, 40, 50, 100 times their previous year performance.
Sure.
How do they do it? So there are technologies and there are mindsets and there are frameworks which can drive this. And we need to plug into those frameworks, plug into those mindsets, plug into those processes as a economic entity in order to acquire that massively transformative purpose.
Yes.
And take the moonshots, because it's no longer going to be easy for us to keep growing incrementally and think that that's going to be life as usual. The Holocene epoch is over. That epoch gave us zero growth for 11,200 years. But today, we simply must have the growth both in GDP and in per capita.
Exactly.
And therefore, we need to start thinking exponentially.
Yeah, we're already closer to the inflection point, right?
Yeah. And we will get there. We are there. The human race has discovered the technologies, and those technologies are converging. And therefore, we will get this exponential growth curve.
Fantastic. Shailesh, we have two questions. One question from Prerna Sharma. Thanks, Prerna. What are your views on Indian companies taking up the sustainability path, and where do they stand currently?
So they are taking to this path in droves. The drove definition comes from the fact that 1,000 top market cap companies are obligated virtually by SEBI from this year onwards to voluntarily disclose what is called the business responsibility and sustainability reporting, the BRSR. So once that happens and it becomes mandatory the following year, that gets 1,000 companies already off the starting line. And what that is going to do is it's going to get everybody else who has still the opportunity to think and stay at the sidelines to jump in. And actually, that has happened. And it has happened at a superlative pace. And I'm pretty pleased that there are over 8,000 companies in India today which are pursuing the ESG holy grail. Everybody's on a steep learning curve. People are still figuring out which frameworks to use, which matrices to use, how do you do the measurements, what do you report, how do you make sure that the report will tie in with your annual disclosures, what space should it take, who should be your audience. All of these questions are being asked and answered as we speak.
Perfect. And does that include the MSME sector as well, or they have different norms?
Very much it includes the MSME sector, because for any large company to be able to report on its scope 2 and scope 3 challenges, they need to have the connectivity to their whole supply chain, which consists largely of MSMEs. And so they are bringing the MSMEs into this whole process because they need to be able to report. And that is a lovely, synergistic, collaborative atmosphere that is evolving.
Perfect. Shailesh, we have one more question. Where do you think the large and mid-cap companies are in terms of governance, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, and whether there is any specific company worth emulating?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's been asked by a LinkedIn user. We don't know who it is, but it's a great question. So I would say if I were to take a very broad swathe, India has 18.5 lakh companies.
Yeah.
And we are today in a position to track what is happening in them in a granular manner on various parameters.
Yep.
So if I were to think about that entire database, then I would say that we are on a scale of 0 to 10 at about 5.5. So there's a very long distance to traverse to actually get way up there. And the reason why we are where we are is that the notions are now getting adopted. The adaption rate is now accelerating. We started on this acceleration path as soon as we discovered that there are more than $1 trillion of green bonds to go get. We started discovering that there are ratings which can totally change the coupon rates at which we can borrow. And we started seeing that discrimination will begin to happen. So your CIBIL score, starting from a humble, very micro enterprise, right up to going to a CRISIL rating, can all drive discriminatory approaches to you, both in terms of access to money, debt and equity, and in terms of access to the best and brightest people. Because people are beginning to ask this question: what is your ESG score? CRISIL has just finished ranking 250 companies on the ESG score. And everybody in corporate India was searching for their rank.
Sir, we have flurry of questions, so I'll just move on. Question from Mr. Deepak Shinde, and thank you, Shinde Sahib. What will be the future of fossil fuel? Very interesting question, Shailesh.
Brilliant question. It does not have a future.
Absolutely.
That's the straight, small, very short answer. In India, I think we can do the transition faster than almost any other nation on earth because we have all the means to do it. And if we are able to get our hydrogen act together, clean hydrogen act together, and we start acting on our nuclear capacity, we start acting on fully accessing our solar and wind capacity,
Yes.
we would be able to do away with fossil fuel driven energy production rather rapidly.
Yeah. Perfect. Uh, One more question from Mr. Jaideep Malik, and thank you, Jaideep. Post the re-auction policy, and this is a fine question that came in for renewable energy. You may have seen that the tariffs have crashed in India, and the company is not able to sustain. Is it right? And India and the companies are shutting their shops. Is the government aware? I'm sure government is aware, Shailesh.
Absolutely aware, and this is actually by design.
Yeah,
This is the way all technology democratization processes will follow this path.
correct.
That you got to meet your costs, and if the costs are high at a certain point in time, then you need to find a way for balancing the total cost, the societal cost as well as the financial costs. And that's the attempt that we made. And then, as more and more people got in, and as we discovered that there are an ability to bring down the costs, we grabbed all of them. But for the period that the capital was invested at a particular assumed cost, it becomes incumbent on those who gave the promise to pay to continue to pay. You can't discontinue your promise because an event has happened post your giving the promise. So that framework is now getting into place.
Sure.
State governments attempted to do this, but they were quickly requested by the high courts of that particular state, which tried this,
Exactly.
to mend its ways. And I hope that becomes a precedent
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it is followed.
Yeah, good question, Jaydeep, really. So you said technology democratization, right? And I'm looking at MSMEs, and we have state versus central, and a lot of stuff, a lot of things that sometimes are not clearly defined. Will there be a government program to help all the SMEs to actually raise their bar and embrace technology so they can be on the same platform eventually?
Absolutely. I think the extent of attention that is being paid today to MSMEs is stunning to me. Not all of that is resulting in them getting saved, but the movement is towards encouraging them to come together, to consolidate, to do virtual mergers, to do actual mergers, to become responsible parts of a supply chain, to adopt technology, to access money. Fullerton was, as you know, just bought out the other
Yeah,
day, and the valuation was rich. The big gainers are Temasek from the country that you come from, Sanjay. So
yeah,
Temasek will have exited Fullerton and handed it over, but it is a company that is going to support the MSME in terms of their financing across the length and breadth of India.
perfect. So one more question, which has come in from Mr. Nandakishore Desai, and the question is: you have been on boards for last 4 decades or more. What changes have you seen, say, for example, 20 years back versus now, the way the board functions today?
Brilliant question. Brilliant question. You know, I can say that it has been a transformational change on the boards.
Hmm.
The richness of information and analysis that we get on the boards, and the demand for and the supply of high level, very well documented insights which is available at boards today is unmatched.
Yeah.
And the next phase, and I would like to make this prediction, is that boards will be empowered to really have a brain computer interface with the repository of data which surrounds the entity that they are in the oversight function on or sitting on the board of, in order to be able to draw down as the need or the occasion arises that insightful data from a de-siloed, well organized database right there where they are. And that is going to be the stunning next step that is going to make strategic foresight on boards extraordinarily possible, interesting, and really the big remit of why
Exactly.
boards should meet.
Yeah. Excellent. And so just taking the board thinking forward, there's a question from Miss Aarti Vazirani. Thank you, Aarti. What is the recent approach of investors towards governance, especially from the startup space and in the advisors that they work with?
Very good question. I think, you know, we need to get these startups who can suddenly become unicorns.
Yeah.
And we've already seen a few decacorns
Yes.
emerging out of India. Paytm is a case in point.
Absolutely.
And so is Zomato and maybe Swiggy and delivery. So
Yeah.
we are seeing multi-billion-dollar enterprises emerging. And the idea that good governance can risk manage the flight path is becoming very, very embedded in the mind frames of these startups and these people who have this driving exponential mindset, taking the moon shots, which they believe in, having this massively transformative purpose, looking at technology as an enabler.
Yeah.
They are the ones who are truly making artificial intelligence their partner. They are talking about it and thinking about it as augmented intelligence. They're not fearing it, they're embracing it. And that is what is leading to this exponential change in India. The amount of digital transactions we are doing, the extent to which we are now able to deal with things at a molecular and cellular level. It's astonishing.
Exactly. Excellent. So there is one more question which partially we have addressed, but this is came from Mr. Captain Mazumdar. We are currently trailing this change and not quite leading it. The next phase seems to be including suppliers and stakeholders in the ESG framework, which is more about supply chain that we spoke about, right? And
Correct.
India, as the world manufacturer and back office, is there an area where we can lead this change?
Fantastic question again. I think we should lead the change in bringing technologies which are converging to life.
Yes.
So we should start with getting the stem cell sample of every child born in India. Okay? Very
Yes.
important that we get there. We should be able to have every moving vehicle and every moving machinery or every manufacturing unit having an IoT enabler
Device.
in it. And
Absolutely.
we need to have a brain computer interface device embedded in those either as an external additive or a wearable or an embedded chip
Yep.
into our bodies. Today, for measuring continuously blood sugar, this is already a feasible
Sure.
option. Ultimately, what will happen is that doctors will not have to get this entire set of diagnostics done as soon as the patient comes and they send them back, go do this test, that test, they take another 3 days, then they come back and then they lose that report and there's no trending, right? All of this is going to get transformed because the record of a person's parameters
Yeah.
is going to be trend lined and available right there where it is required. And you might fall sick when you're traveling. What
Yes.
happens then?
What happens then?
And it's the same with machines, and
Yes.
it's the same with cars. And it's the same with trucks. You can now start thinking
Yeah.
of a digital autonomous organization where a car is completely autonomous.
I don't know. Yeah.
It moves from one place to another, carries one passenger from one place to another, takes the small charge, gets uh, knowledge about when it needs refueling, gets knowledge about when it needs servicing, gets knowledge about all remotely,
Yeah.
artificially embedded into the IoT devices that are embedded in it, and just goes and parks itself at the repair shop or wherever it needs to go, and then gets back on its way. So
Sure.
you can imagine that the entire governance process surrounding a DAO will be very different from the governance process in, let's say, a MSME, right? So, but
Absolutely.
this is the new experimentation that we are all working towards.
Yeah, it's amazing that a couple of days back I was sitting in a kind of a US time frame technology seminar on a similar subject, but more on medical technologies, engineering technologies, and also the freight management and last mile. And of the 20 odd presentations that I sat through, Shailesh, I realized that 12 of them were made by Indians with their own startup companies and their own devices and everything that you can attach today to in technology. So I mean,
Brilliant.
we have the brilliance, we have the people. It is just a question of putting probably the whole ecosystem together and getting
Yeah.
it run for you and leverage that eventually.
So you have just hit the nail on the head, Sanjay. We need to lead this convergence of
Exactly.
technology.
We need to lead this. Absolutely. So there is one more question from Ms. Chaya Segal. What is the number one capability today for a board member to possess so as to enhance all the six capitals of an enterprise? Is the best question today, sir. What is the number
Fabulous.
one capability today for a board member to possess so as to enhance all the six capitals of an enterprise? Fantastic.
And the answer is equally simple. It is be able to ask the right
The
question
right question.
boldly,
Stand up.
and don't rest until you get a satisfactory answer. That's it. Simple. That's what I want in every great board member around me. Ask the right question. Make sure that you get the answer. Not that we'll give it to you next meeting, third meeting. All that rubbish is over. That's what a board member should do.
And I
And
see.
the
Sorry.
entire ecosystem should realize that these board members are not going to get satisfied by an answer which says, "Oh, we'll let you know next time."
Exactly.
Information should be available right there for the board when it wants it.
Yep. And I suppose that's more of, not more, but that's kind of a responsibility that an independent director really can do it well, right?
All board.
All-
I'm seeing this happening. Sanjay, finally, we are now at an inflection point
Yes,
where every board member realizes that we are all in this together.
come together now.
There is no difference between an independent director, non-independent director, executive director, non-executive director. We're all having the same purpose, the same
Yeah,
goal. And we all have to ask the right questions. And we all have to get those answers.
absolutely. Let's make the atmosphere a bit lighter, sir. You
Yeah.
have you have such an illustrious career, and that too so sustainable. And it's no wonder that you are such a strong advocate of sustainability. So, what are those factors behind this success? We talked about in the beginning, a few, obviously, and along the way, who has had the most influence on your career? That is a very key kind of a question for me as well.
Okay. So the influences are uh, simply the lure of the time. You
Yours.
know, uh, I I was in the US at a time when technology was getting merged with physical processes. And I got a chance to work with an exceptional organization,
Hmm.
Ernst and Young, which, the young part, it was called Arthur Young at that time. So we were doing this convergence between manual auditing and computer-driven auditing, and I was at the center of it. So that was a very powerful influence for me to see the merger of physical processes with technology. And then over the years, I kept sensing. I remember on one flight, I just couldn't stop reading the book on cybersecurity. because
Yeah.
that was a completely new world opening up. And just a month ago, I was completely dazzled by the promise of non-fungible tokens and the whole blockchain, IoT, digital data analytics convergence that is
Yes.
happening in the world. And so it's that, the influences are these changes that are happening around us. And it's just that every day you confront completely new challenges and new opportunities. And those have been the influences that have changed me, have led me to reinvent myself almost every 2, 3 years. So anybody who knew me 30 years ago and had heard me 30 years ago would not find any resemblance to what I'm saying or doing today, which is what happens. But if you ask me for the people who have had the greatest impact on me,
Yes.
very early on, it was my father,
Mm.
who was a very giant of a personality. He was the president of the institute and president of the Indian Merchants Chamber, and all of that. And he was the gold medalist chartered accountant, and so
Yeah.
he was a very inspirational person. And we all, at least I believe, totally that there was not a single problem on earth that he could not solve. And so we would go to him with the expectation that any problem we had would be solved. And he did it magically. and, and so that stays with you, and that's a big influence. Then there was
Yeah.
another person who was much older than me, was maybe 50 years my senior. He was almost at the age of 90. A gentleman by the name of D.L. Shah, who ran a company called Perfect Machine Tools.
Wow.
He was the person who brought CNC machines to India. And he was so obsessed with quality and Make in India as a label of high prominence and quality that he inspired me. And he totally showed me the path that if I were to fast forward 20 years, what is the big lesson I would like to learn? I would like to have that commitment, that driving energy. At 90, he walked up 5 stories to go and address a university lecture
Wow.
to students. 90. That's what inspired me. And there are many other people like that, but these two stand out for me.
Perfect. I suppose it's about finding yourself and then having and developing a wider wisdom as well, sir, right?
No, absolutely. It is so important that you discover yourself first. Very important. You
Exactly.
need to know yourself. You need to be able to have a conversation with yourself. But the most difficult ability to acquire is to start and maintain a conversation with
Yes.
someone you have met for the first time
Yeah.
and make it a deep
You
conversation.
got it.
And,
Fantastic.
I remember that I was sitting on a plane with a person called Shailendra, now become a good friend. He was a professor. He was at that time a professor at IIM Ahmedabad. I didn't
Mm.
know it. We were just sitting next to each other. My name was Shailesh, his name was Shailendra.
Yeah.
So it was a natural first connect. And then we talked through the entire flight and lost track of time.
Lost track of time.
So that was a very enjoyable experience. And I count that to many people, recount that to many people
Sure.
as the most significant ability you should cultivate is to start and maintain a conversation.
Excellent. A different question and a brilliant one from Mr. Hitanshu Mishra, and thank you very much, Mr. Mishra. How the Indian Ocean region sensitivity going to impact India in the future, and how much of it is going to be effort from business, and how much of it is from politics? So, keeping the politics aside, if we could take the question,
Fabulous, fabulous question. It's a geopolitical
it's a
question, and I
geopolitical.
think it's a very relevant question to anybody who is managing risk in any sized
Yeah.
organization. So what is going to happen is a scramble for scarce resources. And I see the scramble to be for, scarce metal,
Yeah.
which will be required. So we need to make sure that the governance around that is sensible. There's going to be a scramble for talent. And I think that's something that we will need to really watch out for.
Yeah. Exactly.
What is going to be our risk mitigator or the risk management strategy is going to be what is now beginning to be known as the creation of multiverses
Mm.
and the application and deployment of VR, AR, and mid-reality technologies to creating a digital clone, not only of yourself, which is going to be called an avatar,
Yeah.
but also a multiverse where you could have an experience. Where, for example, you're in Singapore and I wish to have a walk with you on on the promenade. I should be able to digitally transport myself to Singapore and
Yeah.
have that walk along the promenade with you
Sure.
and come back and move between digital and physical realities. That risk, if we are able to overcome, then all these geopolitical risks will get managed because then it will not be dependent on who has the muscle power, who has the best drones, and who can drop the most destructive bombs, but it will depend on who can deploy the best technology and make sure that the human being enjoys the best experience at all times. That is
Excellent.
the world that we should all be working for.
Excellent. So, for me, one personal question from a personality perspective is, after working for so long, what keeps you motivated, and especially after achieving so much in your career?
Well, what keeps me motivated is that uh, all these are just the beginning or the starting points.
Yes.
I consider myself, if I reflect back on how what I knew 15 days ago, I already feel obsolete. And what I've discovered in the last 15 days is so much more than I ever knew before.
Yeah.
So all the achievements just become immaterial. And therefore, the motivation is to keep discovering what I know I don't know. That's
Exactly.
the true motivation. And I know that there are layers upon layers of things that I don't know anything about.
Yeah. I suppose this takes a lot of experience to understand what you don't know, be a part of it, and then go on a journey to find more, right? And then you know more, you know how much you don't know actually, in a way.
And one day you'll flame out, so it doesn't matter.
Perfect. So, just to take a bit of a lighter conversation forward, what do you do if you have to, as we say, let your hair down and enjoy your life? What does energize you personally?
Great question. You know, I felt very sad this morning when I opened the newspaper and I discovered that Dilip Kumar is no more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a movie buff, Hindi movie buff. I watch every Hindi movie that is released, no matter whether it is released on Netflix or it's released on in theaters or wherever. My wife and I are extremely well recognized figures at all the South Bombay movie houses. So that's the way that we actually let our hair down. And then, of course, my best entertainment are my four grandchildren.
Yeah,
And when I am with them, it is magical.
it's magical.
They're just teaching me every minute how wonderful life is.
Amazing. They must be so brilliant, Shailesh. I can imagine that.
Well, they're lovely kids like any other.
Yeah. So we have finished 50 minutes. I need your permission to go on for
Oh,
another 5 to 6 minutes. Is that okay? I have two more questions.
sure, sure. Go ahead.
Fantastic, sir. So next question is about technology, right? There is so much always being talked about technology in recent years. And the future generation, as we all say, is the generation like Z or Alpha, and they are very native to the technology, right? What scares me personally is at the pace at which technology is controlling our lives. And so, my question is, in your opinion, how do we stop technology from crossing the ethical lines in our social and personal lives?
Great question, Sanjay. And this is something that I wrestle with ever so often. So I would point you to a book that I read a month ago called The
Amazing.
Physics of God. Okay.
Hmm.
So what has happened is that as the human race has made more and more discoveries of string theory and
Hmm.
metaverses and the beginning of life and the Big Bang and all the physics of it, they have been able to relate it back to the original force
Yeah.
which kept sustaining things. And you know what was the need for anything to change its state? Who told it to do it? Where did it get that message from? Now, those are questions which are being examined at a very deep level. Was it
Yes.
just chance? Was it just happenstance? Or was there a design? And if there was a design, who was the designer? And therefore, this book, Physics of God, which I read, actually the way I did it was I just couldn't stop reading it. So I sort of overnight. I did an overnighter after a long time, continuous reading.
Yes.
uh, but that answered to me the fact that ultimately
Hmm.
we as a human race will have to discover that we need to come in harmony and we need to come at peace with nature. We'll need to come at an acknowledgement that there is something that is beyond us, and we'll have to learn to live with it in a harmonious manner and simply not allow it to domineer over us as we attempted to domineer over nature and failed.
Hmm.
Because we have failed.
Yeah.
And this whole ESG revolution is because we have discovered that we have failed in many ways.
Fantastic. And then the last question, what would you be your advice to young leaders, SME entrepreneurs, and board members?
I would say come together.
Yes, come
That's it.
together.
Just two words. Just two words. See, whenever I do it, build a relationship, do a transaction, interact, I don't know the counterparty fully, ever.
Hmm.
I go with full trust, complete full trust. And then I let life discover whether this relationship is worth maintaining or it needs to be kept in a bit of a slow track or it needs to be fast tracked. And that is what I would say all of us
Hmm.
engaged in commerce, doing various things, should have at the back of our minds. We do need to come together. We do need to collaborate. And we do need to be discriminatory about how we maintain. I I hate to say anything adverse for anybody. You will never find me behind anybody's back saying anything at all. That's one thing that I would truly request everybody on this call and everybody who might hear this to adopt as a motto. Just
Yeah.
not worth it. Just not worth it.
I just have one observation personally. Can I ask about that?
Sure, please.
So many companies that I read, and the list is ever long of the companies that you see as board of director or chairman. One thing I noticed, and I may be wrong on this, or maybe I do not have enough knowledge, but I don't see a straight competitor in any one of the companies. A similar product made by somebody, and you are sitting on the boards of both the companies. Now, A, is it really true, and is it by design, or of course it will be by design if it is true?
Completely by design. I simply don't want to put myself in the path of conflict.
Exactly.
So I simply don't want to do that.
And as you don't put yourself on the path of conflict, it leads to a path of righteousness and collaboration. automatically as a natural inclination? Does it work that way?
Almost magically, it does.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Shailesh. I would have loved to have another 45 minutes, but obviously we can't. We signed up only for 45 minutes. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Such a wise wisdom today, and such an honor for me actually to talk to you in the same
Delighted, Sanjay. You are an absolutely exceptional conversationalist. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everybody. All the questions that you raised today, for all the delegates, for your time today, and I'm sure every one of you must have enjoyed. I can see all the comments on the right-hand side, and Shailesh, you would have seen as well. Everybody has been profusely saying thank you to you. So amazing popularity, amazing leadership.
So nice. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Charu, over to you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. I second Sanjay ji when he says that we wish we could have gone on for another 45 minutes. As it is, 45 minutes have turned to an hour, and yet it is not enough to pick the brains of someone like Shailesh ji. And I hope I'm not presumptuous when I say that we hope to get him back. So thank you for now. Thank you for your usual brilliant way of making this so interactive. On a closing note, we have another fireside chat coming up on 22nd of July with Dr. P. Sivakumar in the field of life sciences, more specifically in clinical diagnostics and analytical industry. So continue following us at the Celerity Supply Chain Tribe page on LinkedIn to know more. Thank you all once again. Thank you, Shailesh sir. Thank you, Sanjay ji.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.